Hello, Henry from Belgium here. Today, I'm checking this LEGO 12-volt train layout. LEGO already had 12-volt trains in the blue era, but in 1980, the grey 12-volt era began. From that point on, both the rails and the boxes got that typical grey look. The grey 12-volt system is made up of separate, straight and curved track sections, conducting rails and sleeper parts with cable grooves. Everything has to connect properly, otherwise the system simply doesn't work the way it should. Later on, this was replaced by the 9-volt system, where the track came in larger pre-assembled sections. In 1980, several sets were released that launched this new grey era. There was the 7710 push-along passenger steam train, a push train without a motor that could later be upgraded. The 7720 diesel freight train set was basically a 4.5-volt train, but it could also be converted to 12 volts. Then there was the 7730 electric goods train set, the first real 12-volt train of the grey era, with its distinctive red motor. And the 7740 intercity passenger train set was also part of that first generation. In the years that followed, LEGO released many more sets and expansions within this system, often introducing a new complete train set almost every year. And today, I want to take a look at one of those sets, the 7735 freight train set from 1985. Like many 12-volt sets, this one also includes a black 12-volt motor, really the heart of the train. That motor was also available separately. What you build on top of it depends on the train set itself. And there's one more detail you don't really see in later LEGO train systems. Rubber traction bands around the motor wheels. Those give the train extra grip on the track, but after more than 40 years, they're often completely worn out or dried up. Original replacements still exist, but they're not cheap, and you need 6 per motor. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. Checking the track, connecting everything, and testing different motors with new traction bands. In this system, the train doesn't run on batteries, but takes its power directly from the rails. The metal contact strips in the track carry the electricity, and through contacts underneath the motor, that power is picked up. Using the elements from this set, I built a simple oval of about 70 by 85 centimeters, made up of 16 curves and 2 straight sections. One curved rail piece came from a service pack, because that piece already has the fixed cable connection that runs directly to the transformer. The transformer itself dates from 1980 and was specifically designed for the grey 12-volt era. At the time, it had to be purchased separately, so it wasn't included with every train set. And another interesting detail is that the older blue 12-volt track system technically still fits on this layout. But if you want everything to look correct and consistent, it's obviously much nicer to keep everything in grey. The speed is controlled with the transformer. By turning the dial, you change the voltage going into the rails, and that directly affects the speed of the train. And before I start building a full train, I always test the motor separately on the track first. That way, I know everything runs smoothly before adding the extra weight of the wagons. And it's still impressive that many of these motors, more than 40 years later, continue to run perfectly. Over the coming year, I'll show many more sets from the grey 12-volt era. There are already several on the channel, but today I felt like building this freight train set from 1985. The set I have here is complete, with all the parts, the instruction manual, and also the original box. The condition isn't perfect, but I always feel it adds a lot of value when the box is still there. It's actually relatively small compared to other sets in the collection, but it still contains around 500 pieces and 2 minifigures, which makes it a fairly interesting build. The box itself really sets the atmosphere. The colorful and realistic photos show the train in action, the different play features, and also the alternative models you can build. And the inner flap of the box is also very useful, because it clearly shows what is included in the set and what you can build with it. All the cardboard from the outer box is still present. With a bit of care, I might restore it in the future and possibly add new plastic window film as well. Originally, the inner cardboard box also had several cardboard compartments, but that's something I can probably recreate later as well. On the front of the manual, you see the track layout shown in a 4.5 volt setup, so without the center conducting rails. Only on the second page do you see how the layout actually looks in the full 12 volt configuration. After that, the instructions for the locomotive and the freight wagons are presented in clear step-by-step stages. I can't really explain it, but I've always had a preference for freight trains rather than passenger trains. Probably because there's simply more action involved than just passengers getting on and off. With freight trains, you think about maintenance, shunting wagons around, loading and unloading different types of cargo. There's simply more going on. The manual itself has a convenient format, and everything is clearly laid out. In total, it contains 40 pages, which is quite extensive. That's also because it includes a complete alternate model that you can build using the same pieces. On the final pages, you'll also find several track layouts for inspiration, which are always nice to study when setting up a train layout. I've already sorted the parts by color and given them a thorough wash. Even so, on the gray pieces, I can still see slight variations in color, which is simply the result of aging and discoloration over the years. In the future, I might treat them with a special product to brighten them up again. I do the same with some of my older castle sets. There are also quite a lot of black parts in this set. I cleaned those thoroughly as well, but black pieces are often harder to get perfectly clean. Depending on the light, you can still notice dust, streaks, or small scratches. One thing I just realized is that I don't have the original sticker sheet anymore. So I'll have to check carefully whether all the stickered parts are still present in the set, because it looks like there are quite a few of them. These sticker sheets also usually include more stickers than you actually need for the final model. That's because you can choose under which railway company you want your train to run. Fortunately, you can still find these original sticker sheets on Bricklink. There are sellers who offer them for a fairly reasonable price, so it's definitely something I might consider buying in the future in order to fully restore this set. The minifigures in this set are actually quite simple. You get a train driver and a shell service worker. That fits the concept of the set, but honestly, in a train set with around 500 pieces, a few more minifigures would certainly not have been a bad thing. With the shell figure, I'm actually quite lucky, because the white torso is still relatively bright, and more importantly, it has no cracks. That's definitely not always the case with older white Lego parts. Another thing I like here is that the logo is a printed torso, not a sticker. After 40 years, stickers are often worn or damaged, while printed torsos usually hold up much better over time. The shell torso itself appears in about 10 different sets, but the combination with the red cap makes this particular figure effectively unique to this set. The train driver, on the other hand, is a classic town-style minifigure. The torso design is quite recognizable and fairly common, but it still fits perfectly within the Lego town world of that era. And here as well, the print is still in very nice condition. It may not be a spectacular minifigure, but I always enjoy seeing these classic characters again in a set like this. The first thing I'm going to build is the locomotive. But before I start, I'd like to mention something about the 12-volt train motor. There are actually several versions of this motor, depending on the production period. Collectors usually refer to them as Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3. At first glance, they all look almost identical, but the main difference can be seen at the front of the motor. The earliest production motors from 1980 have 2 round contact holes at the front. That's the type of motor that should be in my 7740 intercity passenger train set, for example. A later production run introduced a version with 3 round contact holes at the front, and that's the type you normally find in this set from 1985. After that, Another variation appeared with 3 slotted contact holes. Those belong to an even later production period, and depending on when a particular set was produced, that version can also appear in this set. But to keep things historically accurate, I'm going to use an original motor from the first production run with the 3 round contact holes. The motor itself is essentially just a 4-wheel unit. The middle wheels are added separately as part of the locomotive build. They can move slightly as well, which helps when the train goes through curves. This way, the locomotive gets the look of a larger 6-wheel engine without causing problems on the Lego track. Another detail that adds a nice visual effect in this set is the train motor 12 volts connecting rod, a connecting rod that is 7 studs long. It visually links the driven wheels together and gives the locomotive a much more realistic appearance when it runs along the track. Around the motor, I first build up the base using slopes, plates, and several classic train-specific elements, such as the black train buffer beam, the black train coupling with pin, and the black cylindrical magnet pieces. I also add 4 small ladders, which are not only functional, but also give the locomotive a much more realistic look. On top of that comes the well-known black plate, modified 6x16, with wide motor cutout. From that point on, the foundation of the locomotive is in place, and I can really start building the body with the first red plates and bricks. A nice detail in this build is the use of 6 red 1x2 bricks with a black grille pattern. They immediately give the locomotive a more industrial look, which fits this design very well. In later and more modern sets, Lego usually created this effect with bricks that have actual horizontal or vertical grooves. But this older approach has a certain charm as well. It feels a bit old school, and that is exactly what suits this era so well. This set also includes a couple of 2x6x2 weight bricks. These are special bricks with a metal core inside, which adds extra weight to the locomotive. That additional weight improves traction on the rails, helping the motor get a better grip and allowing the train to pull its wagons more easily without the wheels slipping. In boats, they acted as ballast, helping the model sit lower in the water and making it more stable. Under the second weight brick, I add an arch brick with 2 small levers mounted on top. These are not rare parts at all, and most Lego fans will recognize them immediately, but I still want to mention them specifically. 1985 was actually the first year these levers appeared in Lego sets, so at the time this set was released, they were a completely new element. That might also explain why the interior of the locomotive cab is kept very simple. There's no control panel, no seat, and very little interior detail. The focus is clearly on the 2 levers. Personally, I do find that a bit of a pity. The 2x6x2 windscreens used here are not especially rare, and they are still fairly easy to find even today. The train doors, however, are a bit more special. It may sound obvious, but this set uses a left and a right door, so they are not identical. They also have that distinctive red and yellow color split, and in total, they only appeared in 6 sets. If you want really nice examples today, you can easily end up paying around €2 per door, and even then, you still have to check whether the window insert is included, because that is a separate part. These doors also carry stickers. According to the instruction manual, these doors should normally carry the DB logo, but I can see that a previous owner used the stickers for the Dutch railway company, NS, instead. For the roof, I add a light gray slope brick. These pieces are actually quite well known for developing discoloration over time, especially after being displayed for many years. There are ways to clean them up again, using similar methods that collectors often apply to restore old white Lego parts. If you have your own methods for dealing with this kind of discoloration, feel free to share them in the comments. In the end, I think this is a very nice locomotive, but you really have to look at the design within the time period in which this set was released. By modern standards, it looks quite blocky and not very aerodynamic, but that's exactly how Lego designed trains in the mid-1980s. Personally, I think that actually works well here. For a diesel freight locomotive, the design can look a bit heavier and less refined. That really fits the type of engine LEGO was trying to represent. And because this is a diesel locomotive, you also don't see a chimney or steam stack, which you would normally expect on a traditional steam engine. One thing I do find a little disappointing is that there is no working lighting system included. With a 12-volt train, you might expect that extra technical feature, but it was probably a conscious budget choice. The grey bars at both ends are a nice detail because they give the locomotive a bit more character. At the same time, they do block the view of the lights slightly at both ends, even those are purely decorative. Personally, I think it would have looked better if the headlight bricks had been positioned one stud further outward, but that would probably have required the whole front and rear construction to be redesigned, which would have made the build much more complex. Apart from that, I think it's a strong and robust design with a color combination that really stands out and still works very well today. And a fun fact is that this locomotive was sometimes nicknamed Hercules, after the Roman hero famous for his strength. The next thing I build are the 3 freight wagons, and all of them share the same chassis design. The base for each wagon is a black plate 6x16, on which I add the necessary plates, slopes, and some of the same classic train elements we already saw on the locomotive. That assembly is then completed with a modified black brick 2x4 with black wheels, which provides the wheel sets for the wagons. So I build the same base 3 times, but the cargo on top is different for each wagon. The first wagon is fully themed around Shell, and carries a large fuel tank with a small fuel truck alongside it, both featuring the Shell logo. LEGO's partnership with Shell actually goes back to 1966, and until the fictional fuel company Octane was introduced in 1992, Shell was the main gasoline brand featured in LEGO sets. This set is also the second of 3 LEGO train sets from the 1980s to feature the Shell brand. By now, I've also built the small Shell vehicle, and I just noticed that on my copy, the string for the fuel hose seems to have been cut too short by a previous owner, or at least it's shorter than it should be. The idea is that the string runs from a headlight brick and wraps around the grey wheel. Since mine is too short, I had to improvise a bit for now. Visually, the grey wheel is actually a nice detail, and I understand the idea behind it, but even with the correct length of string, I'm not sure it really adds that much in terms of play value. At first glance, it almost looks like a hose reel, where you could roll out a long fuel hose. But in practice, it works more like a guide, where the hose can simply be stored in place. However, when you look at it together with the wagon, I think the result is actually very successful, with a clear play function and a small storyline behind it. You can transfer fuel from the large tank on the wagon to the small vehicle, which can then drive off to supply customers elsewhere. The wagon, the tank, and the vehicle are also designed so that everything fits together neatly as one complete unit. The use of the hinge plate, which is normally used as a car roof element, is quite creative here. In this case, it works as a fold-out ramp, allowing the small vehicle to drive out of the wagon and onto the platform. Personally, I think that's a very clever solution for its time. On the second wagon, those hinge plates return, and once again, the red railing immediately stands out. What I do find a little strange is that this wagon has that same nice railing detail, but without the mini ladders that were still present on the previous model. This wagon is designed to carry 2 motorcycles, and for that there are modified 1x2 plates with a single stud, so the bikes can be fixed in place and stay upright while the train is moving. This type of motorcycle was first introduced in 1983 and has become a real favorite among collectors. It was extremely popular and appeared in several well-known sets, some of which I've already featured here on the channel, such as 6373 Motorcycle Shop and various police sets. A nice detail is the use of printed number tiles on the studs. These particular printed tiles were new in 1985, so at the time, they were still a fresh new element. These particular bikes are a bit more special, because this version with the red inner wheels only appeared in 13 sets in total, across several different color combinations. Later versions of this motorcycle used trans-clear inner wheels instead. This is also a very nice result, with a functional design that leaves plenty of room for storytelling. On the base of the last wagon, I first attach several plates, including 2 plates with a door rail where the sliding doors will later slide in. Apart from that, all the remaining yellow bricks and plates are used in this build. The windows and doors themselves are nice, but not particularly rare. The parts that really stand out to me are the yellow sliding doors, Type 1. These doors appeared in 16 different sets in various colors, but the yellow version is actually the rarest, as it only appears in one other set besides this one. On the roof, I add the same gray slope bricks we already saw on the locomotive. Here though, I think it was a good choice not to use a third slope brick and to break things up with railings instead. Because of the condition and the discoloration, the roof now shows a whole mix of different shades of gray. The railings in particular look noticeably newer. At first glance, you could almost think they are bluish gray, but that mostly comes from the lighting, and from the fact that they have aged less than the other parts. The mini ladders, which together form one long ladder, are a nice addition and also give the wagon a more industrial look. So overall, I think this is another nice, colorful, and functional result. It is a bit of a pity, though, that this wagon doesn't really carry any cargo and that the whole interior is left empty. The last thing I build is the platform, which is made up of a few black bricks and slopes combined with gray plates. A nice feature here is the hinge system, which creates a small ramp so the vehicles can drive on and off more easily. The platform itself is fairly small, but that also makes sense. It really needs to sit as close to the track as possible for loading and unloading. And since there is only one straight section on either side of the track, a larger platform simply would not fit in between. This also gives me a good chance to show the function of the hinged roof plates and how they are actually a very simple but effective design choice. And now the moment everyone has been waiting for, the train in action. Seeing it run across the track really brings the whole set together. The locomotive pulls the wagon smoothly, and each part of the set adds something to the overall scene. What I personally like about this set is that it allows for a lot of storytelling and activity. You can transfer fuel, transport motorcycles, load and unload vehicles. It's a train that really invites you to create different scenarios around it. Of course, you can clearly see that the design comes from the mid-1980s, with simpler shapes and sometimes more limited detailing, but that's also part of its charm. It's a great example of how LEGO in that period tried to combine playability, technical elements, and recognizable themes. For me, this remains a very successful train set from the grey 12-volt era. Maybe not the biggest or most complex train LEGO ever produced, but definitely one with a lot of character and clever ideas. After some small restoration of the box, cleaning the gray bricks, and checking all the stickers, this set certainly deserves a nice place in my collection. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you'd like to stay up to date with my collection and watch a new video every Sunday, make sure to subscribe to the channel. It's completely free. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.